Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
So a lot of times children in school have trouble moving forward in terms of homework, learning, self-esteem, confidence, many reasons behind that. But oftentimes, one of the main reasons is ADHD. And is it diagnosed? How is it diagnosed? So many questions as a parent. Maybe you're even suspecting it in your child. Maybe it's time to reach out to a coach and an advocate for ADHD. And she's with us today, Karen Lowry, back on the program with us. Welcome back, Karen. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. The one thing that always resonates is, and it seems to center around school. If I'm getting this right, every time we talk, because let's face it, just like our jobs, we spend most of our time at work or at school, and the teacher is the one that's really looking, or teachers, depending on the grade, is really looking at everything there and has a wonderful view of things. But do we make that relationship with those teachers as effective as it can be? What are your thoughts? I mean, parent-teacher conferences, so important. Sometimes they're either the parent doesn't make that appointment or is unable to make it. Thoughts on those conferences?
Well, again, I think that I'll preface it with how difficult I think sometimes our kids are having in school, because ADHD is so invisible as a disability. I mean, a lot of people have been angry with that word disability, and it sounds like a negative word, and it is not meant to be. It is listed as a disability as per the IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. But it's invisible. So if you see some physical deformity, you would say, oh, that person is disabled. But if you see a child with ADHD, you know what you do see? Many times behavior is linked to the diagnosis of ADHD. And so what do we think about behavior? We think it can be controlled. So if this kid could just control his behavior and just pay attention and just, he would be fine. So I don't know. I think that if he could do that, he would, because he certainly doesn't want to be the center of attraction regarding all of the negativity that comes at him when he can't do that. So I am passionate about this. I mean, I have lived it with my youngest, and all of my kids have ADHD, and I've seen it firsthand. It's a very difficult disability to have until you are diagnosed and you have support and the child understands himself.
It's a really, really important thought. And I hear it from friends that are going through this right now and considering testing for ADHD. And what's the first step? Just what you said. Well, little Liam is having some problems in school. He's he's a little hyperactive, so we're going to put him at this table now, and things like that. And he's got to simmer down a little bit, but many times it's out of the kid's control.
It is out of their control, definitely. So my thoughts are today, it's really addressing those of you parents who may believe that your child has ADHD and you're struggling with trying to figure out what's going on in the classroom. Or you have a child who is either on a 504 or an IEP. So either of those scenarios fits what I'm trying to talk about. And that is the parent-teacher conferences. Sometimes they're the dreaded parent-teacher conferences, depending on the child. Because if you have a child, like I had a child with combined ADHD, behavior is always the center piece of what we're talking about. So my thoughts are, when you go to a parent-teacher conference, I think go in there because, again, they're quick. They're usually, and you're warned, we can't go into massive amounts of detail. They're 15 minutes and you're out.
Yep.
So I think if you go in with some written notes to yourself regarding what you believe your child's strengths are, what some of your concerns are for the teacher. Now, all of this, if your child is supported by an IEP, has been discussed with the child study team. But if you have a child in Gen Ed, which is a 504, it's not a special ed, it's just accommodations for how that child learns.
Yep.
Then you need to be I guess the teacher needs to be more aware of some of your concerns, and you need to be aware of the teacher's concerns as well. And also, side note, also, especially if it's the first parent teacher conference, make sure that the teacher knows that your child has a 504 and IEP, because sometimes that falls through the cracks. So make sure that that's another issue.
I can't
You know,
even imagine
it's kind of
that.
concerning. I feel like more uh, than not, the teacher would be aware of an IEP. But I just feel like sometimes the attitude of a 504 is, it's not a big deal. It's optional. This kid's fine. His grades are
Right.
good. He's good. So they don't worry about it too much. So you, the parent, has to bring that to the forefront, come into the meeting and start being aware of all of the questions you want to bring to that teacher, because you don't have much time.
Can we go there for just a moment? And every situation is different, but key questions that you might be able or should be able to ask in that you have 10 minutes with that teacher. Thoughts on that?
Exactly. So, first of all, you want to be aware of grades. And again, grades alone are not a reason for any kind of support, but certainly it's the piece of the puzzle.
And if you're an involved parent, you can look at the portal more times than not and be armed with the grades going in.
Exactly.
So maybe go even deeper. Hi, little Liam, he got a 50, and a lot of school districts, when it's a 50, it's actually below. They have to start at 50.
Yeah. So that maybe talk about if you believe that your child is struggling at home, bring that to the teacher's attention. Do you see this do you see anxiety in the classroom? Do you see him participating in the classroom? Do you see signs of some comprehension issues? Because comprehension is a big deal for ADHD. That does not mean a child necessarily has a learning disability, but comprehension does sometimes go hand in hand with ADHD, despite the lack of a learning disability, that they can't quantify that disability, but the comprehension is an issue. Now, why is that? It could be just because kids with ADHD are impulsive or inattentive and not paying attention to detail, whatever the case may be. But it is a real important piece to be aware of. So does the teacher notice the child missing, maybe not writing down homework or not participating, doesn't appear to be comprehending? I just wonder, if you don't have those questions up front, if you're going to get that kind of answer, unless you're being proactive as the parent, because you're concerned about things happening at home. So I think that is another one. Also, too, let's say it's the middle of the year. So have you seen growth in my child? Have you seen like negative things from the beginning? And do you see things that are happening now that are better? Now, that could be, what could that mean? It could mean your child has a 504 IEP and is working. Maybe has neither, but this is a great teacher and she's putting into effect sometimes teachers are so good, they don't need the support. They note the weakness in that child and they're cueing them to keep them on task. So it's variable depending on what teacher you have. But just to give a shout out to teachers, I mean, I've seen that happen too, where you might not have a child with anything in writing, but you have a great teacher and she's noting things that are lacking and she's filling in the blanks. That might not come to light again unless you're asking those questions.
Every teacher is different too. And I've experienced that from friends telling me and myself, but even most recently, where last year, my friend's son was 6 last year and the teacher just was not on top of things, like even discipline. Kids would be doing stuff. I don't even talk about what they were doing in a kindergarten classroom. And it went to the superintendent of the district because the teacher wasn't paying attention. This year, this friend's son has a great teacher. But yeah, you have to ask those questions. Everybody's different.
And you can't assume that you're going to get that information unless you ask. Not always. And it's really sad. I've seen situations where parents don't know quarter to quarter, report card to report card, what is happening until they get that report card and it's totally different from the one that they got the quarter before. And there was no communication between home and school to even have an idea as to that this was happening. So being proactive, I think, on the parents' end, in these parent-teacher conferences, when yes, you do have a glimpse of time,
Yep.
but if you are able to communicate the concerns that you have and you have it all written down, I mean, it's not to say that you can't have another meeting with that teacher. This is just something that, in that period of time, they don't have. And it may be something that, it might be important for that to happen. And again, my big concern about kids with ADHD are the behavioral types of issues and what's going on in the classroom. And you can't expect your child with ADHD to come home and tell you everything that happened in the day because they kind of forgot. And they don't want to talk about it because it was negative.
Yeah.
So you might not know what's going on. But if you bring it out and you tell the teacher, I can, I'm in one instance, let's say, I see my child very frustrated, unfocused, not comprehending assignments. Are you seeing, and like you said, there's portals and everything, but just to confirm, are you seeing assignments coming back to you on time? I mean, generally a parent knows that either way, but maybe you don't. Maybe you're not sure, or maybe, I mean, certainly there are times when a child might have a project that you, the parent, aren't even aware of, and all of a sudden the project's due the next day. So if you can catch something like that, because again, if this child has ADHD, that child has a lot of executive functioning deficits that impact organization, chunky assignments. When do I do each piece of this project to get to the very end? So if you see that that's happening, then you can make changes in whatever document that child has that's that child's support. If that child does not have that, executive functioning deficits can be seen, as the child grows older, in particular going into middle school, when you have multiple teachers, multiple projects, and they need to be organized. And that's really a tough thing for our kids to do. Very tough.
Did you find yourself, Karen, communicating with teachers or the teacher often? Because I've experienced it, and I just email them. Not all the time, only when I need to. And even, my youngest is in high school, first year. I got them all on the, I CC all of them, and I'm just checking in, want to double check on this.
Good for you. That's good.
You got to be on top. You got to be on top of it. But again, you don't want to be, chicken little sky is falling. It's when you have a concern, you're wondering if assignments are getting done, and you're so on point. Even you look at the portal, or you get the daily emails, updates, whatever. It depends on the system you have or the school district has. You're not getting the full picture all the time. There could be things that are, falling through the cracks, and there's a major assignment that never got done. So
absolutely.
Communication, right?
Yeah. Communication with the school is really important. And I think also in that parent-teacher conference, when you're talking about areas that you're worried about, and maybe the teacher confirms that, then you can talk about what is the best way to communicate with you. Can I email you? Obviously the teacher's busy, has lots of kids. Can I email you on a weekly basis? Or in the beginning, could I email you on a daily basis if I see that there are some issues that I'm worried about?
Yeah, if it's a major, yeah, because you don't want to be that parent, but you also want to show you have concern. And I think once you form that relationship with the teacher, she's going to, or he's going to have your back. They're going to be aware of it. Most teachers really do care, and realize, and I appreciate that the parent cares, that's their life work. You want to make sure that, we're all in sync together.
But I do think that kids in this niche of ADHD have a really tough time if it's not just inattentive ADHD, but it's a combined or hyperactive impulsive ADHD. Because again, they're looked at as you should be able to control that, and it's a very negative circle that can happen. But if you, the parent, is kind of acknowledging to the teacher that my child can be tough, but my child wants to do the right thing, and educate that teacher as to what's going on with that child, because it's a very complicated medical diagnosis. People don't really understand that it's medical sometimes. They just think it's negative behavior and it's the parent's fault. And that's not the case at all.
That's a really great point. Sometimes a parent feels that it's their fault.
all the time. The parents have dealt with all the time.
Oh,
I
yeah.
didn't, only because uh, when I first found out about my youngest, I already had known somewhat about ADHD. I had done a lot of volunteer work with Chad, and I had other kids with ADHD, that kind of a thing. Um, but it's lonely because you feel that negative vibe around you from other parents. And it's very hurtful. And it's hurtful in that you know that your child is being impacted because other parents don't want their child to play with your child.
Yeah. Or, your child is struggling and you don't know what to do. What do I do? I feel I'm on an island. What do I do?
Well, I really do think parents with ADHD are on an island for sure. And that's why I have a Facebook group for it's a safety net. Parents who have kids with ADHD understand the others and they're very willing to support each other. And that's a beautiful thing because otherwise there's a lot of negativity out there regarding medication, over medicating your child, making him a zombie, just awful things that people say. And I can give you an example. My adult daughter, 33, who has been on medication for a while. I mean, it's ADHD truly impacts her, but she got through law school. She's a lawyer, and only recently did she explain to me how she's so she's a mom and she's working full time, and the impact of organizational skills and time management are really hitting her. Now, I say that only because I'm trying to show that, medication alone is not like, this is not a magic pill. You just give your kids meds and then you think they're fine. That is not true at all. This is an adult who's on medication, who is struggling with executive functioning deficits, who is, not being able to deal with administrative type work,
Yeah.
and is being yelled at for it at work.
It'd be tough for any parent juggling everything. And
At
now you
every
add
age,
in.
there's like an ADHD, component, at least in my world. And in her case, my suggestion, of course, is a coach. I think coaching is very valuable for those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
But it breaks my heart because it's tough. ADHD is no joke,
Yeah.
But they're brilliant, they're sensitive, they're intuitive, they're everything wonderful. They just need a toolkit, and they need to
Intuitive.
know what their issues are.
I'm glad you said the word intuitive. And I believe that all of us are. We have a level of intuity. Um, Call it psychic ability, whatever you want to call it. It's all there. But a lot of us can't tune into our gut feeling and all of that because of the noise around us. But
Absolutely.
those with ADHD, in my experience, even teenagers, um, are able to tap into it, but don't even know what it is. And will say certain things like, that person's a little creepy. Something's not right with them.
Yeah.
And if you looked at the background of that person, you would see, oh, and I'm giving just a broad example, but you would see, oh, has a police record, has done drugs, has this, has that. Nobody else would pick up on it, but that person with ADHD somehow is able to, pull that out. They're brilliant. Many are brilliant. And what you're saying about the medication,
And
not
that's
at the,
a whole other podcast, but
let's,
I guess I got off on a tangent because I don't know how I got on that tangent.
well, we were talking about your daughter to start out with and the challenges with that.
Challenges in
But
general for ADHD. Yes.
I'm going to go on a soapbox if I could for 15 seconds with the medication.
Yeah.
Drives me crazy where many psychiatrists, and they're all overworked, many of them in a clinical or a clinic, because insurance will pay for that. And they're just, on the phone with even teenagers, or it doesn't matter. 5 minutes. How's it going? Yeah. All right. Let me, I'm going to phone that script in. No problem. And then
Exactly.
a month later, because it's only once a month by insurance, back on the phone with them again. Oh, it's not working. Let me try another one. Let's throw another one at you. Drop another chemical in your body. Didn't even give the other ones time to react. This is real world. Aware of a lot of this going on. And that's with kids that are not officially diagnosed with ADHD.
Yeah,
That's
that's wrong. That is definitely wrong. Yeah.
yeah, it's symptoms of. So let's just throw it out there. Hear it all the time, all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And
and it's not going to fix it. It's not going to fix everything anyway.
no,
Sure.
I don't know what the answer is because many psychiatrists, because you have to be a doctor to to prescribe, um, they've got a lot on their plate. There because there's so much of this going on and so many having challenges now. Mental health crisis, if you will. If you Google mental health crisis right now, take a look at what comes up.
That I've heard those kinds of things. It's pretty scary. And that's, imagine these kids with ADHD did not
Yeah.
do well during the virtual education that they went through. They
Yep.
did not do well at all.
Yep.
And they
And
have been impacted by that.
I believe that's where it began.
Yeah.
And the one cell, the biggest, hardest hit is teenage girls in our country, mental health crisis, because I don't know the answer here, but my feeling is what you just said, Karen, about the virtual learning during COVID, the isolation, and then you come out of it, then you're on social media, and I can't. That's just mental health challenges in general. Then add ADHD to it. My gosh, what's going on here? Major.
And ADHD has all those comorbid um, conditions that go with it along the lines of anxiety and depression. So he could have girls too who sadly are diagnosed first with anxiety before they're diagnosed with ADHD, because there's
Mhm.
more of them that have the inattentive type of ADHD. So they're not looked at as, somebody bouncing all over the classroom. So they're not looked at as having ADHD. Again, it's all education and knowledge that people don't have.
I'd
So
love at some point, maybe next time, to talk about the different types of ADHD. I don't know
yes,
if there's qualifications for each, but different levels of ADHD. But yeah, you're 100% right. There's a lot of similarities in that. And by the way, in that cell of teenage girls, this is from the CDC. This is not just anybody throwing this out there. 43% of them have thought about taking their life.
I heard some awful percentage recently. It's like mind-boggling that that's the case.
CDC, Google, it's all there. It came out last week, and that's just one demographic. There's so many more, but bottom line here is it's a crisis. And then you add in ADHD, and oh my gosh, what's going on here? And no surprise that we have mental health professionals just overworked, therapists,
Oh yeah.
counselors can't even keep up with it. Um, even for my daughter, I reached out to a new counselor, and they had something at night on a weekend, and I'm like, "You guys work then?" And his reply was, "If we're awake, we fit them in."
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, yep. Only virtual at this point, but they realize how important it is right now, and what a crisis it is. But yeah, there's so much to talk about here. I could go on forever.
I know we
There's
kind of
so much to
got off
learn.
on a lot of different topics, but they're very important topics as well.
Yeah, but even talking about your daughter, as a mom with ADHD, again, any parent trying to put a job and your kids and your life all together and manage the time, challenge in itself. Cha-
Exactly.
Recipe
Absolutely.
for anxiety. I 100% get it. And then with ADHD, even more of a challenge. And I think a lot of us forget about that, especially with adults. Yeah, a little meds, you'll be okay. No, not necessarily.
No, it's not. And I can tie that conversation in with my original topic of parent teacher conferences, because again, if you're starting out from the beginning with your child with important tools moving forward, the sooner that happens, the sooner that child learns more about themselves, because this is not just a label, this is an individual with ADHD. So it's going to be determine who that person is, how those impact that person,
Yeah.
and what kinds of things will be helpful to that person as well. So, because eventually they have to grow up and they have to be in this really rough world out there, and they have to be able to manage.
Yep. And
So the
there's a lot
sooner the
comes
better.
with that. Yeah.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
could do a whole podcast on the healthcare system. Could we do that? Because once you get me fired up, forget it. It's like, why, if you buy your own insurance, I don't know if you have it in your state, probably do. Why do I have to go through the state marketplace? Why are you controlling that? Why do I got to deal with that? broken system. Why can't I just buy my own from whatever company, get the best rate, get the best plan? What do you have the marketplace in? Do you have that in your state? Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, right now I'm not using it because we're using my husband's business
Hmm.
insurance. I know that's true. And
Yeah.
it's very upsetting too because insurance determines what they're going to cover, and people who determine that are not medical people. So, and a lot of these psychoeducational evaluations, to get back to ADHD, if you're doing them private, very expensive, and they're not covered by insurance because they're not looked at as medical, they're looked at as education. So we're talking two, three, I mean, I don't know what it is right now, maybe at least 3,000. They're expensive to go out on your own
Wow.
to do these evaluations, and parents will do it if they get desperate. That's why I always tell parents to first go with the school because they are mandated to give it to you for free. If there's a disagreement, many times parents go outside of that, and that's fine. But again, it's again, insurance is determining something that they don't they're not in that lane. They
Hmm.
don't understand that.
And
But they run the show anyway.
yeah, and so does the school district because based on my experience and hearing from others, when you and I learned this from you, when you request, and by the way, I've told other parents, and this is where I'm getting this from. Karen told me about the psycho education evaluation, not kidding. And it was requested. Okay. And the
Okay.
school district, for these parents, friends of mine, there was a meeting that went on, and it was the school district's feeling, nah, I don't think we really need to do that with your child. But the hook is you can turn around and say, yes, you do. And I'm demanding it. Thank you very much. When will it be? They will
And
get it. They'll do anything to get out of it.
you have to have data to support your concern.
Of
You
course.
can't, you really can't, and they don't usually can't, they shouldn't be turning you away if there's documented data that shows that you need to be evaluated for sure.
100%. In this situation, it was the child is addicted to vaping, and the school district said, "Well, we can't get a real evaluation because of some um, recreational use of vape THC. So yeah, we don't think we can do it for you. Sorry." Well, okay, great. Then what? You're left. Now you're on the island again. You're out there floating
Well,
on
I
the
mean,
island.
not to excuse vaping, but the child could be vaping because he's
Ding.
self-medicating. And
No.
that's why that's important too. I mean, obviously, it's going to leave the system. If that's like an odd excuse not to test somebody, I
Yeah.
don't know what they would say that.
A true story, and I don't know if the school district personally has to pay for those tests, but it sounds like a financial thing. Otherwise, they'd say, "All right, yeah, let's just do it. It's okay." What's your website, Karen? How do we find you?
So my website is ADD um, .com. You can, if you Google it, I come up. And I also have a Facebook group for families with kids with ADHD, ADD advocate as well. You just ask to join, and I'm one of the administrators, and I can get you on for that support as well. I'm also, I will be doing a webinar tonight, and it is to advertise a masterclass, a virtual type masterclass for parents with kids with ADHD, just for more information.
Sure. Fantastic. You know why you easily come up in a search? Because there's not a lot of people doing what you do as an advocate, as a
I don't
coach.
think there is. No,
There
I mean,
isn't.
people that are doing disabilities in general, but mine is very specific. Yeah.
Very specific, and advocate is such a key word because you're in the parent's corner. You're there behind them and walking that journey as you did and still do. So for that, I thank you. I really do, and appreciate you, and look forward next time we get together, and we'll go off on some tangents. I think that's okay.
I think so. I mean, I think it's the first time we did go on this many tangents, but there
You
is a
know
lot.
what?
There's a lot to talk about, though.
There's a lot to talk about. All right, next time, Karen. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Steve.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.